You remember going from a senior in high school to a freshman in college, right? From the top of the food chain to the bottom, like you had to almost start all over. It was like a reality check. Life comes at you fast. Well, multiply that by 10. That's what I feel like it is as a rookie coming into the NBA. And the Sacramento Kings rookie, Devin Carter, he's already going to be behind the 8 ball even more because with his shoulder surgery, he's expected to be out at least half of the season. Well, should the Kings and Kings fans expect anything out of Carter his rookie year? Maybe he won't even play. And that leads me to think about how significant Keegan Murray's impact was as a rookie, helping the Kings end their playoff drought. Bobby Gerould from Hoop Obsession joins me to talk about Devin Carter's transition, Keegan Murray, and a general NBA preview right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And if you aren't familiar with Bobby Gerould, he, of course, is the son of legendary Sacramento Kings radio broadcaster Gary Gerould. And he's also an unbelievable basketball mind and must run in the family. Bobby Gerould has a site called Hoop Obsession, which I highly encourage you to go and check out. Around draft time and the build up to the NBA draft, his work is unbelievable. And that's why I have him on every single year just before the draft to talk about potential talent and picks that the Sacramento Kings could consider. Well, we didn't talk about Devin Carter at all. Devin Carter was not on my radar, but Devin Carter was on his. So we're going to get Bobby's thoughts on Devin Carter and how he feels he'll transition to the NBA. We'll talk about what the Kings should expect from Devin Carter in his first year, especially with the shoulder injury. We'll talk about Keegan Murray's impact as a rookie, and he's doing NBA previews right now on Hoop Obsession for next season. We'll dive into that as well. So I hope you enjoy my conversation here with Bobby Gerould on Locked On Kings. I always look forward to having Bobby Gerould on the Locked On Kings podcast around draft time. And of course, this year I had him on. Before the draft itself, Bobby and I talked about a plethora of players that the Sacramento Kings could consider with their selection. But Bobby, neither of us even brought up Devin Carter. I'm not going to lie to you. When the Kings made that selection on draft night, my initial reaction was, I don't know. I don't understand what the hell the Kings are doing. But as I started to read about Devin more, watch his film a little bit more, and especially with the moves that have taken place since draft night, moving on from Davion Mitchell, things of that nature, the Devin Carter addition seems to make sense. He seems to fit in well with where the Kings want to go, and he certainly jumps off the page to me as a Mike Brown guy. So Bobby Gerould is back here on the Locked On Kings podcast because we got to talk about Devin Carter because I didn't hear Bobby's thoughts on it. I'm excited to have Bobby back. Welcome in, my friend. The season is almost there. You're also working on amazing NBA previews that you have going on at hoopobsession.com. We'll get into that as well. But your initial thoughts, Bobby, on when the Sacramento Kings took Devin Carter and how you think he's going to fit in with the Sacramento Kings' future.
So as the pick came up and it was time for the Kings to choose, on my board, Devin Carter was the pick. So I tweeted out if it was me, I would draft Devin Carter at this time. That ended up being who they went with. So Devin is, for those who might be a little bit casual, he is the son of a former NBA player, Anthony Carter, and he comes with kind of all that knowledge that you get when you grow up having a father who's in the NBA. He's someone who has been around it, been to practices, been in locker rooms, seen what kind of the NBA culture and everything is all about. And he was on my radar going into last season, but I didn't really start to take too much notice of him until right around January. Caught the DePaul game on January 17th. And here's just some of my notes that I jotted down. I always take notes when I'm watching basketball games. And so Devin Carter moves without the basketball, which is something that's the very first thing that I wrote down, which is something I think that will fit in with the Sacramento Kings very well. Because if you move without the ball and you make hard cuts, Domas Sabonis will find you. And I think DeMar DeRozan is also the kind of guy who will find you in those instances. The next thing I see is a catch and finish. Then he gets an assist. Then he scores with a floater. Then he draws a foul on a drive. Then a coast-to-coast pull-up three. I noticed that he's right-handed, and I wrote down that he has good speed. What I didn't know at the time I was jotting down good speed is that later on at the NBA Draft Combine in Chicago, he would post the fastest three-quarter court sprint time in the history of the Combine. So I was validated there by noting that he had good speed. Next thing he does is a transition finish, then a catch and shoot deep wing three, then a crafty paint score. He draws a foul. Then the announcers talk about how he's known as a competitive guy. Okay, yeah, I like that. I like to hear that. Then there's a drive and a finger roll finish, then a steal, then he draws a foul, then a steal, then another steal, then a coast-to-coast finish and one. Then he draws a foul on a drive, an assist, a drive and kick assist. And I'm like, okay, this guy can play. But of course, one game does not a season make or a career make. So we got to see some more of this. So then the next time we check him out, it's against Georgetown, who is a pretty bad team. This was in early March. And in the first half, I got a little bit frustrated with Devin. And really, I never heard anybody say this about him, but I thought he coasted in the first half of this game. And I was a little frustrated. But in the second half, he completely made up for it. It was almost like someone said something to him or something kicked in, and he was fantastic and great, and they ended up winning the game by 13 points. And again, I saw much more of the same stuff. I saw back cuts, backdoor cuts and finishes. I saw the good speed again. I saw the attention to detail on defense that leads to a lot of steals. So this is a guy that I think, as you mentioned, he's going to fit right into the Kings culture as far as I'm concerned. And I think, like you said, I think he will be a Mike Brown guy, a guy who has defense on his mind all the time, competes, hustles, scraps, but also is savvy, on the basketball floor. So I think he has a high basketball IQ. So I like it. Obviously, the shoulder issue is a little scary, and he had ended up having surgery on the shoulder, and we might not see him till January or February. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, right around mid-January was like the earliest, the 6-month point from when it was initially announced.
So, from that standpoint, it's almost, I guess in my brain, I don't know what the Kings are thinking. I haven't talked to anybody about this, but in my brain, it's almost kind of like a Harry Giles type situation where you might as well just redshirt this guy, kind of for the whole season. I'm not expecting much of a contribution from him this year. I think it's a lot to ask any rookie to come in the middle of a season without a training camp, without practices, and then just jump in at full speed. Now, he might be the kind of competitor, though, that they just can't keep off the floor, and maybe he can come in and contribute something during the second half of the season, which would be great.
The value, though, of a player like Devin, to where I almost call him a Tasmanian devil, Bobby, in the sense that he feels like he's someone that Mike can almost unleash. And I know, having followed Sacramento Kings basketball as much as you have over the last 2 seasons that Mike's been here, how many times have we seen in games at times Mike look to his bench and point to a Kessler Edwards or point to somebody and just go, I need something. I need energy. Go give it to me. Yeah. I feel like that is, once Devin is cleared and 100% healthy, he's going to be behind the 8 ball, especially as a guard, right? And a guy that is going to have the ball in his hands. He's not necessarily going to play primarily at the point guard spot, because we know the Kings will have Fox and we'll have Monk and main guys out there kind of facilitating that role. He'll probably play more off ball too, in my imagination. Maybe he develops more into a on ball point guard for the Kings going forward. So he's going to be behind the 8 ball a little bit with not getting the training camp time to work with his teammates and have the ball in his hands and facilitate a little bit. But I could see Mike going to Devin whenever he's available in January, February, March, maybe not into the playoffs, we'll see, and just go, hey, I need 5 minutes here of just exhaust the opposing team's guard, annoy the hell out of the opposing team's guard, or space the floor, or grab me some rebounds, which he does with his great wingspan. Maybe that's his rookie role. And if that's a rookie role, then that's not too bad on a winning team.
No, that would be great. I mean, a little bit more about Carter. You mentioned, the defense, and he's a guy that, I pay attention to defensive ratings within a team structure. And a lot of times it's hard to find guards that have a positive defensive rating differential. And Devin Carter's defensive rating was a full 5 points better than the Providence team defensive rating. You just don't see that very often. So we talked about the great speed. He jumped a 42-inch max vert. So, we're talking not just the great speed, but also the leaping ability. He finished second in Big East and sixth in the entire NCAA in box score plus minus. Those are the type of stats you like to see. Finishing second in the Big East in box score plus minus. I think Donovan Clingan was the guy who finished first. So he's right behind a big center as far as a guy that's making things happen. He's got that 6'8" and 3/4 inch wingspan. So people might look at his 6'2" height and think, well, he's another guard. He's another little small guy. But really, a wingspan bordering on 6'9" should allow him to play up to almost like the 3 spot, if you wanted to play a smaller lineup. So I just think there's a lot of positives about it. I mean, the only downer is that you're probably not going to see him at the beginning of the year. And that might be difficult or frustrating, but at least that's a position, as you mentioned, that the Kings are stacked at right now. And so, it might just be like a really nice bonus come sometime around the All-Star break or something like that, where he comes in and he is one of those guys that Mike points to, and he comes in and makes a big contribution.
Like a reinforcement when the Kings need it right in the middle of those dog days of the season. Maybe that's what he ends up being. Well, Bobby, so you analyze and you scout and break down young talent religiously. It's one of the amazing things that you do over at Hoop Obsession. And I'm curious, every player is different. So there's no, I guess, universal system or universal way to understand a player. But when you look at player trends, how many years consistently do you feel like you need to see something before you totally believe it's legitimate? And I bring that up to talk about his 3-point shooting, Devin Carter's 3-point shooting, because one of the things Monty McNair said when he drafted Devin is that he wants the Kings to build a roster of players who are impact players on both ends of the floor. Which sounds great. It's not always easy to find. And you have guys like Davion Mitchell, for example, high impact player on the defensive end. Offensively, there are question marks. You have players like Malik Monk's been his career. High impact player on the offensive end, really high, but question marks on defense. The Kings are looking for a balance of both. We've seen what Devin can do defensively. You brought up all those numbers. We see what he can do rebounding the basketball, which is great. The 3-point shooting is what really blossomed last season for him. And when asking him about it and talking to his coaches about it, which I got the opportunity to do so, they said that basically they just gave him the green light and almost didn't just encourage him, but told him shoot the damn ball. And that's another thing that Mike Brown's going to do too. Mike Brown is very much, if the shot's there, take it. I don't care how many times you have it and how many times you miss it. Take it, or you're going to pay for it if you don't take that shot when it's given to you. Do you believe in that jump that Devin Carter made with his 3-point shooting last season? Do you believe that's ready to be counted upon or trusted at the NBA level, or do you need to see more of it for a longer period of time?
I'm going to need to see more of it. He shot 37% last year from beyond the college arc, and that was a big jump up from the season prior. So, and you're looking at a guy who's about a 75% free throw shooter. And a lot of times the free throw percentage will kind of coincide. It gives you an idea of someone's touch. So 74.9, I think, was his actual free throw percentage last year, 37% on threes. So yeah, I'm going to need to see it. It's a further shot in the NBA. The defense is tougher. There's more contested shots. So hopefully he'll be able to make that happen somehow.
Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by BetterHelp. When your schedule is packed with the kids' activities, a big work project, school, life, more, everything, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know something makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy, for example, your mental health, they're even more important than ever. I am someone who sees my therapist regularly. It's changed my life. And I was one of those people that felt like my problems weren't big enough for therapy, right? I had to have a loss in the family or be going through something severe or need medication or whatever the case may be. No, we all carry baggage in life, and talking to someone can immediately not just help us with that baggage we're going through, but also give us the skills needed to handle the future curveballs that life throws at us. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and to suit your schedule. All you do is fill out a brief questionnaire. You'll get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day. It's like leg day. Don't skip it. Go to betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. So you talked about the impact earlier, and I'm glad you said this because this is a transition into something that I wanted to talk about that kind of steps away from Devin Carter. Expecting impacts from rookies on teams that are expected to make deep runs. It's not unheard of or anything like that, but it's rarer than people might think. And that got me thinking about Keegan Murray a little bit, who his rookie season, he comes in, doesn't start right away. In fact, was behind the 8 ball a little bit because he started his career with COVID. People forget about that. And then he comes in, quickly earns the starting spot, breaks the NBA record for most 3-pointers made as a rookie, and ends up starting for the Sacramento Kings in their first playoff series in almost 20 years. He makes that kind of impact. Last season, completely explodes on the defensive end. Offensively, maybe took a step back in some ways while advanced in other ways. But really, his rookie season is one I want to focus on and look at and go, man, Keegan Murray making that kind of impact as a rookie on a team that made a really, really deep playoff run. And he's not a number 1 overall pick. And most number 1 overall picks are going to bad teams anyway. That's pretty significant. And I think that's something that is either taken for granted or isn't appreciated as much as it should be.
No, I agree. What we saw from Keegan, I think, in his rookie season was an anomaly in the NBA. More often than not, players just don't make that big of a contribution. So and I'm kind of with you on what we saw last year. I thought he did get better defensively. Certainly, that seemed to be more of a focus for him, and maybe some of the offense took a little bit of a hit. But then, he showed those flashes, right? He had the one night with the big scoring output, and he just when sometimes you're about to say, Keegan might just be a complimentary piece, in the NBA. That might just be his role, a very good one. But when he was drafted, I compared him, and I'm not the comparison guy, but I thought he would have a career similar to like a Tobias Harris, someone who's maybe never an all-star, but someone who's a very good player in the starting 5 on a good team. And so then you see Keegan go crazy and have a big offensive night. And then you raise the bar a little bit and start thinking, well, if he could do that, then why can't he do that on a more consistent basis? And so that's what I'd be looking to see from Keegan. I do think you're right. I think it was underappreciated what he did as a rookie. And we just need to see some continued progress. He ended up being, I think somewhere rated in like the 30s or 40s at his position, if you wanted to call him a power forward in my Hoop Obsession calculation ratings, which I think maybe does him a little bit of a disservice because I think he's capable of doing more. I think anybody who watches him thinks that he could probably be better than that and do more than that. But there were too many nights where there were long stretches where he didn't score, or he just didn't have a huge impact. And he's not much of a playmaker as far as, helping his other teammates out. The assist numbers are not real high for Keegan. He's kind of a, shoot or don't shoot type of guy right now. Low with the turnovers, so you appreciate that. That's always been a staple of his game. But I would love to see some more progression from Keegan as we look forward to this coming season. And it might be even more difficult because now, you've got another scorer on the team in DeMar. And, Matt, there's been, there was, and there still continues to be some talk about, Kyle Kuzma or different guys like that and being added to this mix. And I'm kind of at the point now where I'm like, let's pump the brakes a little bit with the scoring mentality and the guys who think that way, because you're going to have to feed Fox and you're going to have to get DeRozan his shots and Malik his shots and Keegan his shots, and Domas is going to have to, Domas could always be more aggressive in my opinion with his scoring. I want Domas to just not hesitate at all when he's 17 feet away from the basket. I mean, I'd love to see it, instead of him he's not even looking at the basket sometimes. He catches from the high post and gets those elbows out, and he's looking to, and it's like, look at the basket first, bro. And then, and then let's see what's going on. So I think the Kings have a chance, though, to be a good team in the mix. I just wish the West wasn't so darn tough, man. I mean, it's when you really sit down and look at it, and I've been working on, my NBA preview, as you mentioned, for Hoop Obsession. I did the first 15 teams in inverse order. So I started at 30, went down to 16. And the good news is the Kings are not in that first group. So, so you can anticipate the Kings being somewhere in my top 15 when it's all said and done here on the preview. But as I mentioned, it's just so difficult in the West right now. And everywhere you look, teams are good, or teams got better. The Memphis Grizzlies, kind of an afterthought last year, but as we look at the Memphis Grizzlies coming up for this season, I think you're going to have to take them very seriously. Ja Morant is back. That's big enough as it is, but let's not also forget that Marcus Smart is going to be back, who's a great defender. Desmond Bane missed a bunch of games last season, and he's going to be there. And then they drafted Zach Edey, which should give them, some presence in the paint and make them a very difficult team to score on in the half court. And the coaching in Memphis is top notch. I've just always, thought very highly of Jenkins and his staff and what he's able to do. Gigi Jackson's coming along. I just think the Memphis Grizzlies are going to be a good team that people are going to have to think about a little bit more seriously. And I think in the West, you're probably looking at the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Denver Nuggets as really good teams. And I like what the Phoenix Suns did, in the offseason, Matt, looking at the fact that they were kind of point guardless. You could mess around and say you want Devin Booker or Bradley Beal to be your point guard, but you and I both know, in the fourth quarter, those guys aren't thinking about setting somebody else up. They're thinking about they're the man. They want to get buckets and do their thing. Then maybe that was part of the reason why Phoenix was a bad fourth quarter team last year. Well, now they've added Tyus Jones, who's about as real as a point guard as you can get, and to back him up, Monte Morris, who is another guy who's traditionally, assist to turnover ratio off the charts. So I think you're looking at a really good Phoenix team this year that probably is not going to have those kind of difficulties that they had in the fourth quarters of games. Again, it's just so tough in the West. And even if the Kings do get a little bit better by adding DeRozan, they might still find themselves somewhere in that 6-7 range. Maybe it could be better.
Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by GameTime. GameTime is the number one place for you to go now. In fact, it's the only place you need to go to get your tickets, whatever the event is, a concert of any size, a small concert or a stadium show like Taylor Swift or something like that, or Coldplay. a football game at a big stadium, a basketball game at the Golden One Center, wherever you're trying to go, get your tickets on Game Time. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier than before. Game Time Picks filters out all of the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets, right? Game Time will immediately point you to the tickets with the best deals in the area that you want to sit. And the Game Time is incredible because you will save more money the closer that you get to an event. So let's say you're not sure if you're going to be able to go to the Kings home opener against the Minnesota Timberwolves on October 24th, right? And it gets to the 23rd and you're still not sure. You wake up the morning of the 24th and your friend can go, or you got off of work or whatever the case may be. And now you can go to the home opener. Well, the tickets are going to be cheaper then than they were the day before or a couple weeks before or even now, right? The tickets, the closer you get to the event, they are going to be cheaper. You have so many great features on Game Time, like their all-in pricing, their seat views, the lowest price guarantee. So go and download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's code Locked On NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. You didn't even bring up the San Antonio Spurs, too. I think San Antonio is going to be significantly better, too. Just with Greg Popovich being there, year 2 of Wemby, the addition of Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul. Like, I think that's a team that's – I don't think the Kings should be concerned about necessarily because the Kings absolutely are supposed to be better than that team. Mm-hmm. But that's just another team in the West that was out of the picture last year that I think is going to be knocking on that play-in door. And really, Bobby, I mean, you listed off a number of teams there. To me, this is a – There are like 3 tiers in the West. There is the absolute top, which to me is OKC, Minnesota, Dallas, and I think out of respect, I'll put Denver in there. Mm-hmm. Then there's a big block of teams that are right in the range of 4 seed through play-in. Mm-hmm. And then there's essentially the Portland Trailblazers, which are like kind of at the very, very, very bottom at this point. And maybe they still have good players. Jeremy Grant's still there. They could be good. They got young players, so they might be better too. Chauncey Billups trying to figure out what he's doing over there. So like the West, you're right, is absolutely ridiculous. But one of the things I'm thinking about for this year, the mindset that I hope the Sacramento Kings have, Bobby, is there are so many teams in the West that have so much talent. The parity of the league is fantastic right now. Every single game matters. But what I want the Sacramento Kings to try and get themselves into a position of doing consistently, especially at home, is try and force teams to beat you at your game. A lot of times I feel like Sacramento tries to, and it's good to game plan and try to adjust to what other teams are doing. You have to do that, right? You can't just do your thing and bang your head against the wall and hope it works every single time. Other teams are going to make adjustments. But I would like to see the Sacramento Kings, with the addition of DeMar DeRozan, the talent they have with Domantas Sabonis, I would like them to be not as easy to figure out. And what I mean by that is kind of the Warriors set the precedent for here's how to disrupt the DHO a little bit. Here's how to disrupt Sacramento offensively, and teams picked up on that. I think the addition of DeMar DeRozan directly helps with that. Okay, the DHO's taken away. Let's get the ball to either Fox or DeRozan, and they'll just go and get us a bucket at the end of a possession to where defenses are frustrated now because they worked their ass off for 18 seconds of a shot clock, and still the Kings got 2 points out of it. So I just would like to see, with the West, as talented as it is, that the Kings separate themselves as one of those teams where the entire NBA looks at them and goes, man, we played really, really well against them, and they're still either right there or we still ended up losing. And that's what great teams do, where the Kings are trying to get to.
Yeah, one of my mantras always is, Matt, is matching up is what the losing team does. Mm-hmm. And I just think in all the years I've watched basketball, it doesn't matter what, if it's NBA, high school, whatever, the teams that are good dictate. They play exactly what you said. They play how they want to play and make you adjust. And so I've never been a fan, and I'm often very critical, when a team, say for instance, goes small and then the Kings feel the need to match up and go small. And I get that there has to be some adjustments, in the middle of games and every once in a while that stuff works out. But to me, it's like, no, stay true to what you do and where your strengths are, and keep, the Kings get in trouble and got in trouble to me the most when Harrison Barnes was playing the 4 spot. Now, some people would look at it and say, well, they started right off the bat with him playing the 4 spot. I always kind of looked at it like Keegan was the 4 and Harrison was the 3, and it may not make any difference. It could be semantics. But the point is, if Harrison is basically your 4 guy, or he's the next biggest guy out there along with a center, you're really putting yourself at a rebounding disadvantage. You're putting yourself at a length disadvantage. So those are the things that I would like to see a lot less of. And it will be interesting, and Mike Brown's going to have his work cut out for him because, DeMar DeRozan, as good as he is, he really is the size more of a shooting guard. He doesn't have a huge wingspan. He's played small forward most of his career, but he's a shooting guard size guy. And so if you're going to incorporate Monk, and we don't know, I mean, have you heard definitively if Monk's going to be in the starting lineup, or is
that was going to be the next question I asked you. That's going to be a huge topic of debate come training camp time too, because I was curious where you were going to go with that starting spot. I'm of the belief, Bobby, that Monk should start. He's your best. He's one of your best players. Just put him out there. And Mike has already shown a tendency to adjust his rotations to where, like, it's crazy to me, and people don't talk enough about, like, De'Aaron Fox is the first guy Mike Brown subs out of the game consistently.
Yeah.
He's your best player, but he's the first guy you sub out because that's because of rotation. You want to make sure you have one or Fox and Sabonis on the floor at all times. Why can't you do the same thing with Malik? You start Malik and then have Fox come out. Malik's running the second unit now, then bring Malik out. Fox comes back in. You have them close together. You have them start together. I don't see why it couldn't work. But that's just my belief. Those are just my feelings. That's going to be a big topic.
Dude, I'm totally with you on that, because it's like, if Monk is good enough to close, then why the heck isn't he good enough to start? It doesn't make sense.
Forward.
Right. It doesn't make sense to me. It's like starting the game with a hand tied behind your back. And, they say, well, we like his punch off the bench. And if you started him, then you wouldn't have a score off the bench. Well, yeah, but if you started him, maybe you'd be in the lead so much it might not matter. It's just like, and I've used this analogy a million times, and so forgive me for the people who have heard me before, but it's like in the old radio days of programming music, they had a thing called day parting, when they would play certain songs only late at night. It would get on the mix late in the night, but they wouldn't play it during the day. And then someone who was smart figured out that Tupac is a hit at 9 a.m. just the same as he's a hit at 10 p.m. You know what I mean? And so that's what the research showed. And so they started playing, stuff round the clock. And that's kind of, where radio's at these days. And so it's like, quit day partying my man Malik Monk. Let's roll him out right from the get-go if he's good enough to play overtime, and he's clearly one of the 5 best players on the team. I don't think there's any debate about it. So you're just going to get back to that Fox, Monk, DeRozan, Keegan, Domas. To me, that would be my starting 5, and you're going to have to ask Keegan and DeRozan to play up a little bit. They're going to have to contribute, but DeMar's always been a good defensive rebounder as a guard, and so he's someone who I think can get in there and do his thing. I still do think if there's a hole in the Kings, or if there's something that they could do to make this team a little bit better, it would be another guy who is kind of a hybrid, 3-4 type guy that could, fit in off the bench. Because I think Jordan McLaughlin is a really solid guy. His team defensive numbers are off the charts and have been for the last couple seasons. So I'm excited to see, what he can do there as the backup point guard. I think you're going to gain some efficiency there versus what you were getting from Davion. And probably not lose that much defensively. Jordan's not the on-ball defender that Davion Mitchell was. Not many players are in the NBA, right? But nevertheless, he is an excellent team defender. And so, when you look at McLaughlin and Keon Ellis and Alex Lynn on the floor together as, part of your backup unit, those are 3 really good defensive players. And Kevin Huerter, maybe he takes a little bit of a back seat and is someone who comes off the bench. And then you got Trey Lyles, who right now I would pencil in as the backup 4-man.
Mm-hmm.
And for me with Lyles, it's like, which Lyles are we going to see? Are we going to see the Lyles from 2 years ago that had 28 dunks? Or are we going to see Lyles from last year who had 6 dunks and clearly was just not as aggressive or as dialed in as he was a couple of seasons ago? So I'd love to see a little more depth at the 3-4. I get really worried as a Kings fan about the Jalen McDaniels addition. He's someone who can really defend. I mean, he really is a good defender, NBA quality defender, but he is really offensively challenged, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at his numbers from last year, were about as bad as they could get. And in my rankings, he ranks really, really low. And and Mike Brown has a tendency to have a soft spot for these guys that can really defend, but are offensively challenged. And we've seen it from Mo Harkless through, I don't know if Mo was there when Mike Brown was there. Was he? Maybe not.
I don't think so. I think that was the very last year of Luke Walton, but we know how that went.
Yeah. Chuma Monecki and KZ Okpala. And, you can kind of go through this list of guys where Mike, wants to just Juan Toscano Anderson. He wants to throw somebody out there who is a defender, but then they're just so offensively challenged that it just takes away, in my opinion, all the good or whatever that the supposed defensive prowess, is supposed to bring to the floor. You've got to still be efficient. You still got to be able to shoot the ball, put the ball in the basket, make some plays, grab some rebounds, do something other than just play defense.
And I think that's going to be one of the main things to monitor too, come preseason and training camp time too, is, and I'm not saying Mike is wrong for emphasizing defense. And look, he's a head coach / assistant coach who's been there before, been to the finals, won the finals, got rings. So when he says you need to defend in order to get there, I believe him 100%.
Me too.
I do feel that the Sacramento Kings went too far away from their offensive identity last season in trying to the take or the return from the sacrifice of stuff on the offensive end defensively was good, especially the second half of the year, but it wasn't enough. And with the roster that you have, the roster that you've brought back, Monty McNair continuing to kind of emphasize offensive talent with the pieces that are here. I'm just very interested in seeing, Bobby, if Mike still emphasizes defense in the sense that we want the defense to be better. We need the defense to improve. But I think we all can agree the Sacramento Kings are going to go as far as they're going to go, or the Sacramento Kings are going to only have a chance to actually compete for a title, which they all say is the goal, if offensively they get to that level where teams are like, we don't know how to stop them. That's where it has to start. And then you add defense on top of that. Now the Kings are unbeatable. So, but it has to start with offense.
I agree. And I love Mike Brown too. I think he's a good coach. But I do think, just like every coach and every broadcaster, every person like me who does stuff on the internet, we can always get better. We can always improve. And if there's one criticism I have of Mike, it's sometimes his impulsiveness. When he gets frustrated with guys defensively, players have been over his quick timeouts. Like I sit right behind the bench on a regular basis at the home games, and there'll be a defensive letdown. He calls a quick timeout, and literally I see guys rolling their eyes. Like come on, man. And it's sometimes it's corrective and it's good. But I think I'd like to see a little bit less of it. I'd like to see him show a little more trust in his team. And I'd like to see less of the impulsive, this isn't working, let's just, grab some random dude off the bench that's going to, come in and play some defense. But then what happens when he's wide open and the ball swings to him and they don't even guard him because he can't make a 3-point shot or a perimeter shot? And so those are the things that we get into. And there has to be a better balance of that. And I'd love to see Mike just kind of, let it roll sometimes, like you said, and just realize that offense is the strength. And teams are going to have a hard time outscoring the Kings. You look at this group, man. I mean, we've got some firepower. They ought to be able to put up some serious offensive numbers. And, you just hope that the defense can hold its own and be there enough for them to somehow win more games than they lose in a major way. I'm thinking somewhere in the high 40s. I'd love to see this team get to 50 wins. That might be a little bit of a stretch, just given how tough the West is. But if everything goes perfectly, and you never know how injuries are going to affect other teams and what all is going to happen there. I think there's a shot at it.
I think 50 wins should be the goal. I mean, 50 wins. If you're a 50-win team in the Western Conference, you're a playoff team. I mean,
absolutely.
I don't see and you won 46 last season with how much you struggled, how many games you dropped. You won 48 the year before. Like 50 is definitely achievable for this team. So that should be the goal. Maybe expectation is a little far. I think internally that should be the expectation. Externally, we'll just go along for the ride. But I think it's going to be a fun ride, Bobby. I appreciate your support and your work, of course, always at Hoop Obsession. Go and check out Bobby's extensive previews for this upcoming season. It helps you kill the time before the season actually gets here. Like you said, he's got his bottom 15 teams already out. The Kings aren't a part of it. Hey, good to say that. And then we'll see where the Kings end up on his top 15. Bobby, I won't ask you to spoil it. We'll just have to see when you drop that. So thanks so much, of course, for you coming on the podcast. Thanks for your work as always, and look forward to chatting with you very soon once Kings basketball gets going.
You got it, Matt. Anytime.